Alright guys, so it is super dark out. Why is it super dark out?
The sun blew up.
The sun blew up.
It's nighttime.
The sun is extinct, I think.
Yes, it is nighttime. We are here up...
Wouldn't we die if the sun blew up?
Yes, we would definitely die.
Yeah.
We are here at the Sasquatch Outpost here in Bailey, Colorado. We are going to do the Night with Sasquatch. Because you guys enjoyed We Spent the Night with Sue so much, we figured we'd give you another one and spend the night with Sasquatch.
Kind of a history to show that this is nothing new. This has been going on since the early 1800s, even recorded late 1700s of incidents of people encountering Sasquatch. So I'm only going to mention a couple of these, and then we'll see more as we go back. But this was a drawing made by Albert Ostman. Now, Albert lived in British Columbia, and he was a prospector, and in 1924 he said that he was picked up in his sleeping bag and carried for several hours by a big male Sasquatch, and then dropped down in where that Sasquatch's family lived, and there were 4 total. The big one, a female, this is his drawing of the female. Now the big one, he said, was 8 feet, probably weighed 800 pounds. The female was maybe 7, he guessed 500 to 600, and then there were 2 younger ones. They didn't hurt him, they kept him there for a week, and he was able to escape because in his sleeping bag he had a box of snuff, and they were fascinated by it, so they started eating it, and they got sick, and he was able to get out. I don't know how he even knew where to go, because he didn't know where he got carried to.
There was that one, it was somewhere like the Midwest. There was a story of an orangutan because they didn't know what girls were. So it was like a giant orangutan, they called it.
This film, the Patterson-Gimlin film, is still the Class A video from any time, anywhere in the U.S. or Canada, and it is a real video.
Oh my God!
So this is a blow up of that frame, and so here's the reasons why this is genuine. One is, and even though there's more than one person who still claim that they wore the suit, here's why they didn't. The main guy who's claiming he wore the suit is 5'10".
Was that Bob?
He's a neighbor of Bob Gimlin.
Yeah.
He's 5'10". She was 7 feet 6 inches tall. They know that because of landmarks that are still there today that she walked past. They could triangulate and get her height. She weighed at least 900 pounds based on the depth of her footprints in the sand next to people walking in the same area. Hers were way deeper. She had breasts. Why make a suit with breasts? Why would you do that? It's so much harder to do that. You could see her muscles moving under her skin. She had an injury on her hip, a hematoma here that moved with her, but you can see the tendon on the back of her leg. You can see the hollow on the back of her knee. I have a friend who's a plastic surgeon in Kansas City. He has studied this film at length, and he knows women's bodies because he has to do all the plastic surgery they want him to do. And he said this was a middle-aged female. She'd had young. The fat deposits were in the right places for a creature that had several young. And so they walk differently. The arms are a different length than ours. Their legs are a different length in proportion to the rest of their body. The biggest proof is in 1967, nobody had technology to build a suit like this. The guy that designed the costumes for the original Planet of the Apes movie was nominated for an Academy Award for the costumes. And if you remember that movie, all you ever saw of the apes was their head, their hands, and their feet, because he didn't have any way to build a full suit that looked real enough. And they asked him years later, could you have built this suit in 1967? He says, absolutely not. We didn't have any technology to enable us to build a suit that could do what this creature did and walk convincingly and have the muscles showing. So it was just, people say that Patterson had a deathbed confession. He never did. The man that gave me this is David Paulides. He's written all the Missing 411 books. David spent a whole day with Patterson's widow. She said, no, he never changed his story before he died.
So, with the Patty footage, because we interviewed Max Hawthorne, who knows Paulides as well, but he was talking about how you can actually possibly see two Bigfoot in that.
There's a lot of mystery surrounding this video, and controversy, because there is apparently, if you can see the last few frames, there is apparently a male that she walks over to or near. So there were two, but there's also a bright flash that many think was a gunshot at the very end of the video, and there's discussion about the fact that whether she was killed. She did have an injury on her hip. The question is, was that inflicted by people or by an accident that she had? And it could have been a gunshot wound, I suppose, is what the thinking is. But Bob's still alive. He still travels, still speaks at conferences. Let's go over here and I'm going to show you some stuff here. So these plaster casts, some are on loan. Some, they start walking around the lake and leaving tracks. And so these were the first tracks we ever found. The first eyewitness I ever met was a gal named Kate. And Kate used to run the Bailey Lodge just down the road here a couple miles. And she saw one back behind the lodge, back in this direction, in May of 2012. And she and her best friend were out hiking, going up a old forestry road. She took me to the site where it happened. It's private property now, they don't let anybody on there, and they're walking up this road and they hear up above them and to their left this loud crack. And so they both looked, and this big Sasquatch comes running down the hill. So they were going up kind of a top of a little hill. There was a ravine and another little hill and then another ravine, and it was on that maybe 200 feet away.
Wow.
And it ran down the hill, bent over, with its butt sticking out and swinging its arms. And it ran down the hill without even trying to slow down. The hill was so steep, when I went over there and I tried to run down it, I had to, brake myself, but you could see every 6 feet there was a scuff where it had stepped on the pine duff. It was that's why there were no actual tracks, but it was just pine duff that was kicked up as it ran by. But it didn't even attempt to slow down. It just ran full speed down the hill. But at the top of the hill was an old dead tree stump with a bunch of branches, and there was one branch broken off, so it had stepped on that intentionally to get their attention so they would look at it. And they do this, I've heard this more than once, where I'll tell you another story later, where they do the same thing. If you're not in a place to see them, they want you to see them in some cases, and they wanted these two women, they wanted them to see it. So this is at Bailey Lodge, and this was about January of the next year, and people accused her of hoaxing this because, well, what's the probability? The gal who sees one works at this lodge, and all of a sudden these footprints show up at the lodge. So those are the first we found. It's probably the second set we found were these here, and they were down by Wellington Lake. On the way to Wellington Lake, there's a a side road you can take. And we were out looking for Sasquatch signs, and so we saw these tracks crossing the road in the snow, so we stopped. Half the group went one way and half the group went the other way. So the road, this is a rock outcropping, you can see it if you drive down this road. It's way off on the side of the hill. The road goes back behind here. And so the tracks came down off the road, through a marshy area, then climbed up on this rock outcropping. And on top of the rock outcropping was this track, which you can obviously see the toes, and then this little baby track that was about 3 inches long. Elkhorn Ranch up near Estes Park. And I don't remember how long this one is. 18, 19 inches maybe. But these two are local to here.
And those are giant.
Yeah, they're huge.
Because I've seen Robert Wadlow's shoe, and he's the world's tallest man. They weren't that big.
Yeah, I don't know what size his shoe is. I don't know
37 double A.
what size these would be
Those
if you
are
had to
crazy
build a
big.
shoe for them.
Yeah.
But really big. If you can get where you can see this. So in 2016, April, this guy comes in the store, taller than me, had 2 full sleeves tattooed. He was a mixed martial arts fighter, and he's walking up and down in front of the counter, really agitated. So I finally said, "Can I help you with something?" And he looks around, see if anybody's watching him. And he said, "Yeah, I have a question." I said, "What?" He said, "Do you have someone in the woods in a suit?" I'm like, "What do you mean, like a Bigfoot suit?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "No." And then he walks somewhere and he goes, "Are you sure you don't have anyone in the woods in a suit?" I said, "I'm positive." And then he says, "Look me in the eyes. Tell me you don't have anyone in the woods in a suit."
No.
I said, "I do not." I said, "Besides, this is rural Colorado. If I stick a guy in a Bigfoot suit and send him out in the woods, what's going to happen?"
He's going to
He's
get
going to get
shot.
shot. And so, why would I do that? And so I said, "Why? Did you see something?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "When?" He said, 2 hours ago. So it was 2 in the afternoon now. So at noon, he had gone hiking up the Ben Tyler Trail with his pit bull. He was about halfway up. You have to go switchbacks to the top of the ridge that's right over the highway. So he was only halfway up. You could still hear cars down below. And his pit bull is ahead of him, and like most of us, he's walking looking at the trail. So he turns up the next switchback. His pit bull comes backing down the trail, didn't even turn around, backs down the trail and is getting ready to go between his legs and take off, and he reaches down and grabs her collar, and then he finally looks up and he thought, what is she? And he sees this thing standing in the middle of the trail looking at him 40 feet away. So in 3 to 5 seconds max, he thinks, "Oh, that doesn't exist, what I'm looking at." He said it had old man boobs and a pot belly. That's the way he described it. So it was probably a pregnant female. It never moved. It just stood there in the middle of the trail. But clearly, because it was standing in the trail, it was saying to him, "You and that dog are not coming any farther up this trail." He left the store. And before he came back, I called another researcher friend of mine. I said, "Hey, this guy had a sighting. You want to meet out there after work at 5?" He goes, "Sure." So then this guy comes back in 2 hours later and he's like, "There's something wrong with my head." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I went home. I burned all the chicken I put on the grill. I dumped 2 gallons of water in the kitchen by mistake." He said, "I'm just not right in my head." I said, "Well, I think you're in shock from what you saw." And I said, "Look, I'm going back out there. Will you go with me and this other guy?" He goes, "Fuck no, I'm never going back there again." And we talked for 30 minutes, and I finally convinced him to come back as far as the parking lot. He wouldn't go any farther than the parking lot. And so we did. We went back. He waited. He tried to tell us where it was, but we didn't find anything. The ground's so hard here that you can't usually find a track. And then we came back to the store afterwards, and I filmed him telling his story. And then this guy, who I've never met, starts weeping in my store. And he's like, there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with me, and he's just crying. I'm like, dude, I don't have an answer for you, but you've seen something that most people have never seen, and your brain's still trying to wrap itself around that. And he said he left and went to Alaska to be with his brother for a month. Left his job. He said, I had to get my head back together. Was inspired by this movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek. And they just last year remastered this movie in 4K and Blu-ray and remastered the sound. And so we sell those out front. But this movie got me going when I was 10 years old, and a lot of people trace their interest back to that movie. It was the first docudrama ever made about Bigfoot. And at one point in the movie, Bigfoot puts his arm through a window of a trailer, which he actually did in the real life in the story. It's a true story. Most of the people in the story, in the movie, were the ones who had the encounters, so they're not professional actors. But this is in Fouke, Arkansas, and they till today have incidents where Sasquatch comes through town, and Boggy Creek is the creek that runs through their town on the outskirts. So there's a guy in Georgia named David Bucara. He's got a great big Bigfoot museum. He went to Fouke. He met a guy who had the remains of a dog pen, and his dog pen is now up on the wall, and you can see the pen, you can see some blood on it. And the story was, this guy lives in Fouke. He had a bull mastiff that had pups, and he left one day, and they were in a pen. He came back, the pen was demolished, the pups were all gone, and her hindquarters were twisted like this.
Ooh.
And on the tree next to where the pen was, about 6 feet up, was this big bloody mash. So what the Sasquatch had done, she'd obviously tried to protect her puppies. He grabbed her by the hind legs, and then he would swing her like this and hit the tree and swing her like this. And whenever he would swing, she would twist. So her legs were broken and twisted, her hind legs. He just bashed her against the tree to kill her and dropped her. People have lost livestock in Fouke, pigs and other stuff, but that's where this idea came from for this sculpture. This is a phenomenon that's going on all over the country, where horses that come in from pasture have their manes braided. Always 2 braids down to 1. Sometimes they're very intricate like this. This one actually is from Oregon. I got to change this. So it was braided, and then the bottom braids were then tied into a knot. This was a horse that I own. He's still here. He's in about 10 miles from here in a place called KZ Ranch. And we took him out of the pasture and trailered him to a location where we're having an event. And I'm just messing with him, getting his bridle on, and I noticed this on his mane. So he's a black horse, black mane. You almost didn't see it. And I asked Paul, who now owns him, I said, did you see this? He goes, no. And I said, what do you think did that? You know, if you look, these are tight knots all the way, and then tight knots all the way down here, and even this little strand is braided down here. And I've had people tell me on Facebook, oh, that happens to my horses, just horses grooming. You know, it's just the wind. I'm like, look at that and tell me if the wind can do that. There's no way.
I can't even do that.
No, it's tight, tight, tight. And so, so I cut him off of Hunter and stuck him in here, but he was the only horse in the pasture. They usually do it to mares, but in his case it was an exception. But I don't know how they got Hunter to stand still long enough to do that to his mane. And during the night something came and shook this truck. There were some guys sleeping in the truck. Shook the truck. When they looked in the morning, they found this handprint, muddy handprint, and the dermal ridges on the hands, ours are 1/64th of an inch apart. These were 1/16th of an inch apart.
Oh, wow.
So that's how massive this hand was. It was like 4 times as big as their hand. And there's just no way to fake this. You can't fake these dermal ridges. and they're so wide you can see the gap between them. Ours, there's no way you can even see the gap. And so it was climbing up. There was a steep hill to the other side of the truck. It was obviously climbing up, got its hands all muddy, and then shoved the truck. Why they do it, I don't know. And then left this big handprint. Ram boxes. This is just my hand, closing and opening the box. This wasn't there, and I couldn't replicate it because this finger was so far out. I put my hand next to it, and there was no way I could get my spread that far away. This was also on the truck, and I don't know how they did that. It almost looks like the fingers are backwards. If that's the heel of the hand, how did they get their fingers to do that? And then they had opened and closed the gas cap, just messing around. This was a crazy story. I was out looking in March 2013, looking for tracks, and this was about 10 miles from here. So I find these elk tracks going through the snow, through the trees, and the elk is shitting the whole way as it ran, which they never do. They'll walk, they'll stop, they'll drop a pile, they'll pee, and they'll keep going. But it was just droppings all along the way. So I thought, and it was running. I thought, what was this elk running from? That's really bizarre. Then I came upon the imprint of its body in the snow. Perfect legs, head. So this elk is running full speed. All of a sudden, it's in the snow, and it didn't move because all the legs were there. There were no. These are my tracks. There were no elk tracks leaving there. No blood, no drag marks, and no body. Then we noticed these tracks that converged from a different direction, and these were 10 to 12 feet apart every time, every stride. 10 to 12 feet apart, and the tracks themselves were over 20 inches. And they came right up to the elk, and then they carried on. And so we deduced that the elk saw the Sasquatch, bolted, literally scared the shit out of the elk, and the elk was trying to get away, and the Sasquatch cut him off, somehow knocked him to the ground, and then picked up the body and walked away. It's the only explanation, because that elk did not get up on its own and walk away from there. There were no tracks leaving there. This is the original picture. This is the blow up of this. The gal that took the pictures heard something, started quite a ways back. She heard something like a baby crying, and her husband stopped and was resting. They're both in their 70s. She kept going, and the sound of the baby kept moving back and moving back. And when she finally got to these big rocks, she thought, I'm not going to go any farther. I'm not safe out here. So she just took a bunch of pictures. And she noticed when they blew it up that behind this bush is this Sasquatch, behind this pine tree. So you can see his nose, his eyebrows, head, his right shoulder here. So he's standing behind this tree. Well, they went back several weeks later, doing an investigation, same time of day, took another picture. There's obviously nothing behind the tree now. And there's the original picture there. You can see his face better. And they think there were more than one back here. But to get to the same height, Mark had to stand on the rock, hold a stick up with his hat. That's how tall that Sasquatch was. Ooh. So they figured he was, 6 to 10 feet tall. Depending on if he was standing on the rock or if he was standing behind it, he was 10 feet tall. And he's just standing there looking. So, but they went to the exact same place to try and reproduce it, and that's how high he had to get to be in the same position as that head. So this is Boomer. Boomer's 7 feet 6 inches tall. I built him out of insulating foam. The explanation is over there in the corner. 4 blocks of 6-inch foam, and then covered him in llama hair. And Brett raises llamas and takes people out in them with them. But It was the only hair I could find that I thought would be realistic enough. But Boomer's only going to be here a short time because I'm going to pick up 2 new Sasquatch that we're having built professionally in Columbus, Ohio. And I have to redo this whole thing. I have to move this rock and this log out because the new one is 7'3", but he's stepping forward like this, and he has his arm around, he'll have his arm around that big tree, but he takes up so much space because he's moving forward that there's no room behind Boomer. I have to move everything out. We moved these trees in. This one took 5 of us to get it in here. Hopefully it's lost a lot of water weight by now and we can shut it out a little bit. Our lights are all off. If we have anything, we have infrared through a night vision, but infrared does not create a reflection. And so this is the first time I saw eye shine. And this was about 10 miles, 12 miles from here. But we parked and we climbed up this steep hill and we got to the top and we walked forward a little ways and we found some rocks and we sat down in the dark, turned off our lights. And I started seeing these little pinpricks of light. Now we were looking, off to my right was Wellington Lake and there were lights at Wellington Lake. But straight ahead is Lost Creek Wilderness and there was nothing back there. And so I started seeing these pinpricks of light and I'm thinking, I'm imagining that. And I kept looking and you can see better out of your peripheral vision than your direct vision at night. So when I would turn my head a little bit, I could see the light. When I would look, it disappeared. Eventually, the lights got closer and closer, so I said to the couple I was with, now I have to say, on the way up this hill, I had my knocker. I knocked twice and got a reply both times. But the reply came from the other hill, the other side, from where these were. But real fast, bam, bam, both times. And I said to him, don't think this happens every time I take someone out. I said, you guys are really fortunate. So then we're sitting there, lights out. These lights get closer and closer. And I said, do you guys see those lights? And they said, yeah. And the husband said, I think that's our campfires or something back there. I said, no, there's no campfires back here. The terrain goes flat in a little ways. It drops off into this deep ravine and goes straight up the other side. So we were looking at this mountain that went straight out. There was no way you could build a fire back there. Then when I turned on my night vision camera, I could see not just a pinprick, I could see 2 eyes. This was like they turned their head sideways. 2 eyes here. This, I don't even know what it was. It was like it was lighting up the bushes around their face. But there were 3 or 4 that we could see. And all of a sudden the husband goes, what the? I said, what? He goes, those are moving. And I said, I told you they're not campfires. That's something else. And I think it's eye shine. And so 2 of them, as we were watching, kept moving. And finally one was over here and one was over here. And I started thinking, I don't like being flanked by whatever this is. And so I said to him, we were there 30 minutes at least watching this. So I said, let's head back to the truck. Now in my mind, we had walked straight up, sat down, so the truck is back this way. So I turned around and started heading back to the truck. And after 30 yards or so, I pull out my GPS and it shows that we came straight up the hill and we were going straight further into Lost Creek Wilderness. I'm like, that can't be. I said, we turned around, that's impossible. And I said to the other guy, do you have a GPS? He said, yeah. And I said, are we going back to the truck or are we going further in? He goes, we're going further in. I thought that's what you wanted. I said, no. But that just shows how disoriented you can get in the woods at night. But this is where we track people that come in. Every pin on this map was put here by the person who had the experience. I haven't counted in a year or so. The last I counted, there were 85 visuals. I think there's well over 100 now. All over the state. So red is visual. Green is a vocalization like we're hearing over here. Yellow is some kind of a tree structure. Blue is when somebody's had something thrown at them.
Oh.
and which I've had happen multiple times, and black are tracks that people found. And so, but I mean, we're right here in Bailey, so you can see how much has been going on over the years just around us in this county. Castle Rock, okay.
We were filming out in Castlewood Canyon
Yep.
because we were doing a documentary on the dam, and it had just become dark, and so we were walking on the road,
Yeah.
so we could cut down the time. And we were out with another group member who's grown up in the wilderness, and we heard some weird vocalizations, and they seemed to be getting closer, so we stopped. And they'd come closer, but then they back away, they come closer. We couldn't figure out what it was. Oh my God, Sam.
Sasquatch.
Oh, there's the ghost. He doesn't know. He has no idea.
Oh, I have an idea.
Alright, so that's not the entire spending the night experience at the Sasquatch Outpost. Obviously, we've edited it down a little bit, or otherwise it'd be a super long video. But if you did enjoy this latest We Spent the Night video and want to see more Culz vlogs, click that link to your left. If you want to see more of what we do here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. And let us know, have you seen a Sasquatch?